To the UK Independence Party meeting for the 10 European candidates standing in the May election, May 2014 European elections. We have Janice Atkinson with us. She's a journalist from Kent, a writer, and writes for the Daily Express, amongst many other things, and stood in the last general election for the Conservative Party. We have Ray Finch, leading the UK Independence Party in Hampshire County Councillor. We have Paul Oakley, Paul from London's barrister from London, and we have Nigel Jones, a writer and historian from Lewis. Right, without further ado, I'd like to ask Nigel Jones to give you his presentation.
No, I think I've got a fairly loud voice, so I hope you can hear me at the back there. I'll speak up if I can. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for coming tonight. I have to say it doesn't say much for Eastbourne nightlife that you prefer to come here and listen to me to go clubbing or whatever you do in Eastbourne overnight. But it's very heartening to see such a huge turnout tonight for an ordinary speakers meeting, no dancing girls or anything else. It says a lot for the work of the Eastbourne Party that the branch has been built up to this extent. I don't know how many of you are members and supporters, but anyway, it says a lot that we've gone from a very, very small base to this. And I know it's the same all over the country. I'm not going to talk about myself tonight because I expect most of you have cast your votes in the European elections. I'm going to talk about our country and our party. I joined UKIP in 2010. I'd spent 7 years of my life living in Europe. I used to be married to a French woman. I speak fluent German. I am a pro-European. However, I hate and detest the EU, which is the enemy of Europe and the enemy of freedom and democracy in our country. That's the main reason why I joined UKIP. I've never been for any length of time in any political party before, although I have to confess, for about a month I joined the Conservatives when Ian Duncan Smith was leader. When he was forced out and David Cameron got the job, I took one look at that blanche of quivering blancmange, and I knew that the Tory party were only going one way, and that was downhill. The same applies to Labour. We don't even know that. We've got the experience of 13 years of Labour misrule under grinning Tony Blair, who started the destruction of our country, and under fit-to-be-tied Gordon Brown, who completed it. The Labour Party has deserted its base, which was the ordinary working people and the trade unionists of this country, for I don't know what. For Ed Miliband, a Hampstead-educated son of a Marxist immigrant, who basically has no real base in this country or any understanding of what ordinary working English and British men and women think, do or live. He is as rarefied as David Cameron with his Eton and Oxford background. There's nothing wrong with a good education at Eton and Oxford. Anyone who can afford it can pay for it. But David Cameron has had virtually no real jobs in his life, and the same applies to Ed Miliband. Sorry, it's very, very easy to confuse those two, isn't it? Because they're sort of Tweedledum and Tweedledee. Except that Tweedledum didn't stab Tweedledee in the back like Ed Miliband stabbed David. Basically, the three party leaders represent a political class with no base anymore. They've lost their roots among the ordinary voters, and they don't represent what we want. They represent what their masters elsewhere want, and ultimately their masters are the EU bureaucracy, the kleptocracy in Brussels. It's often asked why UKIP are standing for the fake assembly that is the European Parliament. We want to abolish it and we want to withdraw Britain from that Parliament, so why are we standing? When people ask me this question, I say the best way to undermine the Tower of Babel, it's the European Parliament, is to get inside it and undermine it from within. Nigel Farage has become a national figure, at least in part, through his YouTube spreading of the speeches he makes to the European Parliament, particularly, for example, his denunciation of Herman van Rompuy as a wet dishcloth, which is, in fact, only the truth. Farage has become a national figure. It's often said that UKIP is a one-man band, and Nigel Farage obviously is our hero, and UKIP wouldn't be where it is today without him. However, the presence of us four on this platform today, without Nigel's support, shows that we are far more than a one-man band. We are a national movement. We are on the rise. Today, figures were announced, in my opinion, totally false figures, saying that the Conservative Party has 134,000 members. When David Cameron became leader of the Tory party in 2005, they had more than twice that. So even if you accept their lying figures, which I don't, I know for a fact that it's under 100,000, you have to accept that more than half the Conservative Party members who were there when David Cameron took over have left in total disillusionment. There are now three so-called left-of-centre parties in our democracy, all three of them espousing the same social democratic policies, the same policies that have failed and will fail, the same policies that have driven this country down the tubes. David Cameron, only a few weeks ago, was proposing to take this country, despite the experience of Iraq, into yet another Middle East war that would kill more of our boys in the services for no conceivable British interest or gain whatsoever. What on earth was he thinking about? This was, ladies and gentlemen, an act of insanity. And only one party disapproved it and openly said they were against it. And that party was UKIP. And that party was representing the overwhelming majority of people in this country. Because of our membership of the EU, we have no other choice. In less than 6 months' time, we are going to open our doors to innumerable, God knows how many are coming, immigrants from Romania and Bulgaria. We have no choice but to let them in, even though our unemployment, particularly our youth unemployment figures, are very high. And I speak as a father of 2 young men of employable age. It's very, very difficult for them to get work. And yet we're inviting in even more immigrants that will place unbearable strains on our housing, on our health, on our education services. Where in this are the interests of the people of this country? They are not represented by lib, lab, con. If I can be vulgar, if I can borrow a vulgar phrase from that wonderful man George Galloway, lib, lab, con are 2 cheeks of the same backside. And if you count the libs, that's 3 cheeks of the same backside. There isn't really a cigarette paper's worth of difference between them. The only party that speaks for the majority of Britons, and I'm talking about Conservatives and Labour and people with no political background whatsoever, is UKIP. We're a movement. People say that all the parties are losing members. That's not true. UKIP is gaining members. We now have more than 40,000 members, most of whom have joined in the last 2 or 3 years. We are on the rise. You only have to look at the by-election, the parliamentary, forget about the opinion polls where we're consistently well over double figures and consistently beating the Lib Dems. You have to look at real elections where we're winning seats on councils and parliamentary by-elections. We came second in Eastleigh. That was pretty good. We came second, amazingly, in South Shields, where David Miliband waltzed off to a job in New York. We had a candidate who had not stood before. We came from absolutely nowhere in a rock-solid Labour seat where they weigh and stuff ballot boxes with Labour votes rather than count them, and we came second. We came within an ace of winning that seat too. The future is ours. We are going to come first in the European elections. Of that I have no doubt, because the majority of people in this country share our perspective on Europe and the EU. But we must build on that for a general election. We must do what the Liberals did at the last election, and that is hold the balance of power. We must go out, every single one of us, and work and win new members and convince people in arguments and discussions that we are the future and that the three main parties, the three Westminster parties, who have surrendered their powers to an unelected and increasingly sinister bureaucracy in Europe, do not represent them anymore, and that the future is ours. Britain can again be a prosperous, adventurous, outward-looking, world-trading power once more if UKIP get enough seats and enough influence. We already have forced David Cameron to promise his fake referendum on Europe, which I don't believe for a moment, even in the unlikely event that he's going to be returned to power in 2015, he will find some way of weaseling out of it. He has already openly stated that he himself, come what may, will support Britain's continuing membership of the EU. Within 10 years, this country will no longer, and this is a serious, serious threat, ladies and gentlemen, will no longer be what we have always been, a free, independent and prosperous nation. We will be a powerless province of a European superpower with no more power than we had when we were in the Roman Empire. And that is a very serious threat. And only UKIP can mobilise this country against that threat. So I ask you to go out and work, and I'm sure many of you are already doing this, and spread the message. UKIP is the future. UKIP is the future of a free, prosperous and independent Britain. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you.
I'm also going to try and speak without a microphone. Can you hear me at the back? Yes. Good. Well, thank you very much, Eastbourne, for inviting me to speak. It wasn't a long journey to get here tonight, I mean to UKIP from the Tories, because I was always on the sort of UKIP wing of the Conservative Party anyway. But I'm not going to talk about that tonight. I'm going to talk about some very serious legislation that's being passed in Brussels as we speak, and there's a debate on it today. Now, hands up anybody that was at the Institute of Economic Affairs a couple of weeks ago where I spoke. One. Good. So you're not going to hear it again. And also, I'm going to talk about something that there's a committee in Brussels called the Women's Rights and Gender Equality Commission. Yeah, you couldn't make it up, it actually exists. And it's full of people that have never really had a paid job in the private sector before. And these people are trying to impose upon us mandatory gender quotas, which I absolutely refuse to have in this country. Now, not only do I write for the media in the Huffington Post, the Daily Mail, and more often these days in the Daily Express, but I also run a business called GoTradeLive.com, and I head up the philanthropic side of that. And what we do is, if you think about a sort of business that is a bit like eBay, but it's a private platform for SMEs. Now, what I'm going to talk about, has very serious consequences for anybody that's running a business in this country. Not just publicly listed companies, but also SMEs as well. And I'm also going to do something I don't generally do, is read for some notes, because I hope it won't be boring, but it gets a bit sort of technical at times, so it keeps the flow going, so I hope that's all right. So forgive me. I organised the debate at the IEA a few weeks ago, and Godfrey Bloom spoke. And Godfrey is our representative on this Women's Rights and Gender Equality Committee. But he does stand up. He was there today. We had some great fun on Twitter with the Conservatives who were trying to say, well, we're opposing this. Where is UKIP? Godfrey was in the debate and just saying, no, 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 no. You should be taking part in this debate. You should be voting against it. But you don't get it, Conservatives. Yes, we do vote against it. Absolutely we vote against it. But we don't sit there amending all the time. You don't understand what the fundamental role of UKIP is, and that's to basically oppose and to stop this stuff coming down the line. So, I do believe that the EU is bad for business because it simply doesn't understand business, the dynamics of how business actually works. When you've got 28 states coming together and legislation is being passed down, a one-size-fits-all for 28 states just doesn't work. Now, I don't know about you, but I get very fed up as a female, as someone who's in business telling me how to run my company. And now we have more interference from the EU, who wants to impose gender quotas on UK publicly listed companies. But as of today, the amendments were passed, and that will include SMEs, that's small medium-sized enterprises with less than 250 employees. And there will be sanctions. If you don't sign up to these votes that are being amended, and the vote I think is going to come in November, then you'll see companies being prevented from going for government contracts across the EU and, more importantly, in this country. And there's a possible threat of delisting as well. Now, you think about it, if you run a family company and you don't have any female members because you're 6 brothers, 4 brothers or 5 brothers and it's a family-run company, where are you going to get your 40% of female gender quotas from? But the political interference doesn't stop there. At the gates of the EU, because we have Harriet Harman dictating to us that we should have gender quotas, and because they've introduced them into the Labour Party, and all those women that are going to Europe next time on their MEP list are all quota women. They are actually elected through all-women shortlists. And as you know, it doesn't stop there. Harriet Harmanista, as I call her across the media, I call her the High Priestess of the Guardianist of Feministas, believes that we shouldn't have single-sex clubs. She wants to ban pastry in the Sun, and she wants to wrap lads' mags up in little paper bags and put them on the top of the shelf. And don't think the other parties are any better. She's joined across the political spectrum by the Conservatives and the Liberal Democrats. They also pander to the number of small people who lobby for this, about niche groups, about what they want. And it's all very covert. I mean, when I was a Conservative, although they don't actually actively have all-women shortlists, I was part of the so-called A-list that gave preferential treatment to a certain number of people. And there was a covert election and an election of women in the party, and we've seen that with some of the useless ministers that we've got across the South East, like Maria Miller, who's supposed to be Minister for Justice. You know, she wanted to ban single-sex clubs a few weeks ago, and she refused to go to the Open. And you've also got Helen Grant, the sort of quasi-faux Conservative that was parachuted into Maidstone at the behest of David Cameron. And you've got, I'm afraid, you've got many more examples of people like that on the Labour benches as well. But I say to these women like Harriet Harman and those in the Conservative Party, they make up really a London liberal elite. They don't represent the rest of us, most of whom have never been employed in the private sector. And I also asked, they've asked ordinary women what they want, rather than just chatting amongst themselves in the little liberal bubble of London that they exist in. Have you actually asked the woman who works in Tesco's whether she spends her time thinking, oh, she works on the tills, wondering what the gender balance is of Tesco's, or whether Sir Terry Leahy or his successor has been replaced by a woman? No, like us, if she has ambitions, she's probably thinking about whether she can be a store manager one day. And we know that the retail sector has an excellent record in helping women to succeed. But there are problems of trying to get women to come through the pipeline. We have to address the pipeline of how they come through, support and mentoring. I offer mentoring in my own company, and I know that UKIP is doing this with not just our women, but those that want to stand for us as well. You give women a profit and loss account, which is something that is woefully not happening in companies, and give them profit and loss sheets to run, and put them in charge of staff and train them, and then we'll get there organically, not by forced gender quotas. And just remember also, there's quite a lot of women who choose not to get to the top, who choose not to seek promotion. And what about the industries who traditionally employ men, like North Sea diving, heavy engineering, electronics, oil and gas? Where are they going to get their quota from? It would be unrepresentative to appoint 40% of women to the boardroom where they do not have a 40% of female workforce. And I'm not talking about the secretaries and those that work in IT. And also, we have to look at education. Girls and boys are supposedly educated the same. They make choices. Some are pushed down the stereotypical gender route. But you can't force boys and girls to make career choices to make up a gender balance quota. I recently attended a gender balance quota conference. Yes, there are such things, and one of the participants was Gordon Brown's former favourite pollster, Deborah Madison, who runs Britain Thinks. She recently published a comprehensive study of men and women's attitudes to gender quotas, and she found across all classes and gender that the result was an outstanding no, except in the public sector, where there was a small majority of women in favour of quotas. when Deborah turned to the audience, and it was a mainly female audience made up of media and think tank people and people across politics, and said quite indignantly, well, I'm dismayed, and I bet you are too. She was rather surprised at the audience's response and the attitude. There was audible no's and shaking of heads. They didn't want positive discrimination or gender quotas. But that's what the chattering political classes don't get. They don't understand what women want. But I suppose Miss Madison did actually ask them. And even though they gave the wrong answer, that won't stop Harriet Harman and her party and the Modern Conservative Party, and it won't stop the EU either, because it's coming down the line, but it's up to us to stop them. And if you elect me, and we've got our ballots at the moment, so it's all closed and all done and dusted now, if you elect me, and then the electorate elect me to go to Brussels, I'll be on that committee as well, and I'll be challenging them, because it's absolutely fundamentally wrong that I, as a woman, refuse to be targeted and said I'm a token woman. I'm not. We're not in this party. I've got here because I went through an assessment process. I've stood in a general election. I'm quite happy to battle for myself and the rest of the women, but not just the women, the men too. And I promise you I'll do that for you.
Indeed. Right. Thank you, Ray.
Good evening, everybody. I'm sure you can all hear me, can't you? Yeah. You've heard me before. Wonderful speeches from the last two speakers. Basically, I've come here to tell you how different I would be in comparison to our other possible MEP candidates, who are all wonderful people and would do an equally good job. Those of you who know what I do normally, I work for Nigel, I run the South East office. I'm also the leader of the Hampshire group, UKIP Hampshire group on Hampshire County Council, which is great fun, it really is. What I like doing, I like knocking on doors. I like visiting people. I like going out, building branches, working hard in this country, in the South East, particularly because that's where I'm based. But that's what I do. If you want someone, you know, who's like Janice, who would, you know, go to all of these committee meetings and would know the ins and outs of everything on it, wonderful. There is a place for people like that. But it's not me. I wouldn't be doing that. Frankly, I wouldn't have the patience to put up with all of their lies and deceit. You know, I just couldn't do it. What I would do, I would be a worker here. I would help us to get branches fixed, to make sure we've got enough candidates, enough quality candidates, trained properly, so that we can get MPs. Because we'll never win over there. Whatever happens in Brussels, it doesn't really matter in the end. All they can do is make our lives worse, piece by piece. The MEPs over there from the Conservative Party and the Lib Dems and Labour and the Greens, all the various different shades of social democrat that we've got, all they're doing is operating a policy of managed decline. That's all it is. That's all it is. In essence, they're Vichyists. You know, I'm sure most of us here understand what happened in France in the Second World War. Whereas we're the resistance. We don't work with them to make things just a little bit less bad than it would be. We want our country back. That's what UKIP's about. And that's what I'm about. No compromise with them. No working with them. None of that. Work here in this country, get our country free. That's the only way we can do it, by getting UKIP MPs into the only parliament that really matters to us, the only one that really counts. And then we'll get ourselves free. We're seeing it now, the effect that we're having. As Nigel said earlier, with Syria. If Nigel Farage hadn't come out and said, openly and plainly on all of the media, UKIP are against this, it's immoral, it's wrong, and it will never work. You know what? That vote in Westminster would have gone the other way, because they'd have thought they could get away with it.
Yeah.
We're here, all of us are here to make sure they never get away with it again. We were against all the other ones, but at that time it didn't matter because we were 2 or 3% of the electorate. But now the electorate listen to us. The tide's turned. The tide has finally turned, and I'm sure you all understand it when you're knocking on doors and speaking to people in the shops or the pub or the golf club. people who previously would have said, you know what, yeah, we agree with you, but you're never going to do anything. Now they're saying, yeah, I'll vote for you. You're right. They're giving us the chance now. It's up to us to take it. It's up to us to lead strongly on issues like Syria. You know, what we did, what Nigel did specifically, but the party as a whole, was say no. And then Parliament had to listen because they're terrified of us, so they said no. And then what happened over the pond? Obama. He said no. Because he couldn't rely on the British Parliament. And the British Parliament realised that UKIP are a force and that we speak for the British people. So we've saved how many countless lives already in Syria? Not just our own troops, you know, our own soldiers, sailors, air forcemen, not just them, but the innocent people who die as a result of collateral damage. You know, we all saw what happened in Bosnia. You know, you cannot run a war and just say, we're going to take this out. Everyone in this country understands that. The politicians don't care. They didn't care. It wouldn't matter to them how many Syrians died. But we care, because we're ordinary people. We're the sort of people who, if we were in Syria, we'd be getting bombed. And we actually have a connection with people all over the world. So when people say, oh, you're little Englanders, you're xenophobes, no, we're not. We're the real globalists. We're the ones who actually understand what Britain's position in the world should be. And it should be as a moral leader. It shouldn't be gumbook diplomacy. We tried all that. It didn't make us incredibly popular in the long run. And it wasn't the right thing. America now believes it should be the world police. And they're wrong as well. The only way that Britain can lead politically in the world now, you know, economically we're still a very strong country. The only way we can lead is to be moral. To look after ourselves, to live our own lives as a democracy, in peace with our neighbours and our friends, to trade with them, and not to go attacking them just because their way of life isn't our way of life. Let them do what they want. Let them see what's best. But what will happen is the people in those countries, they will see Britain as a happy, prosperous nation, full of people who want to live in peace and who just want to make a better life for themselves. And they will then say, we want that. And that's the only way you'll get change in these countries, by showing a lead, not by bombing them. You don't make any friends by bombing countries. You never have done, you never will do. So, if I can just, I'm going to be quite short on this, because this was something that really was important to me, that I felt that we really made a difference. And so I'm not going to speak too long, but what my entire campaigning has been about, it's been about Britain first. If we do right, if we do the right thing, if we live in peace and harmony and trade equally and fairly with our neighbours, and particularly with our friends in the Commonwealth, who we so shamefully deserted all those years ago, if we can do that, then we'll have a Britain fit for heroes. Thank you.
So the last speaker this evening is Paul Oakley from London, a barrister. Thank you very much indeed, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, good evening, everybody. I do notice that this is being filmed, so in the circumstances I will be very careful not to mention bongo land. This is a rather strange job interview. You have 1, 2, 3, 4 candidates here. I cannot think of any other job interview where the applicant turns up and says, I want to lose my job. I want to lose my job as quickly as possible. Yeah. This is not a long-term career choice. This is something that hopefully we're only going to do for about 2 years. Because apparently, and I'll come back to this in a minute, apparently we're going to get a referendum in 2017. And we're going to vote out. That has to be the certainty. We cannot look to the long term on this. And one of the greater pleasures of this is that not only will we lose our jobs, but every single other MEP for the old parties in this country will lose their jobs as well. That is a plus point. And let me ask you this. Maybe you've heard of Dan Hannan. Yes? Everybody's heard of Dan Hannan. All right, one or two haven't, but some people have heard of Dan Hannan. Leave him aside for 1 moment. Can any of you put your hand up and come out with the name of a single other MEP from any of the old parties? Be brave. One. One. Out of this entire room, we have no idea who these people are. They sit in Brussels, raking up the food, raking up the expenses, and enjoying life. And then they have the audacity, because you will have seen this in the press, you will have seen this if you're on Twitter or Facebook or any of these other twiddly things that kiddies like on the internet. They have the audacity to attack us. And they say, UKIP, well, they're lazy. They're never in the chamber. They're not standing up for Britain's interests. They're not fighting for Britain's corner. These people, ladies and gentlemen, are collaborators. We are not the slightest bit interested in making the European Union work better. The only thing that matters is to make sure that it is the Westminster Parliament that decides all of the laws that affect Britain. And these MEPs from the old parties, I should be slightly vulgar here. They expect us to be grateful to them. They are in effect like a toddler showing the contents of its potty to its parent and hoping for applause. There is nothing intrinsically valuable in what they do. Now, one great advantage of all of us, when we lose our jobs, we'll go back to our old jobs. This is wonderful because we have actually had careers. We've worked, we've set up our own businesses. I go into court several times a week and I'm very nasty to people who are on the other side, and it's great fun. But we can all go back. We can all go back to that. But just think for a minute. The old MEPs from the old parties do that because they have done nothing else ever apart from going to Oxbridge University, going into the party to work as a researcher, getting a safe seat. They have no people skills, they have no life skills, and most importantly, they have absolutely no knowledge of life and the effects that their laws have on the people of this country. It's not very nice. There is a German expression, Schadenfreude, taking pleasure in the misfortunes of others, but I am very much hoping to take great pleasure in the misfortunes of all those people who are going to lose their seats. Now, one thing, some of you, does anybody like Star Wars? Has anybody seen the Star Wars film? Yeah. Yes? We know at the very end of the Star Wars film, when the Rebel Alliance blow up the space station, the Death Star, and they all have a wonderful party and they're handing out medals and so on. Do you remember that? It's not going to be like that when we leave the European Union. No. You can't rest. You're all activists. What you have to understand is that since 1972, 4 decades ago, European law has been infesting British law. I have to deal with it on a regular basis in the most strange circumstances. I'll see some new act come in, or more likely nowadays, a statutory instrument which hasn't even been before Parliament. And it's new to me, so I'll go into Middle Temple Library and I'll look it up. And I'll look up the original, and then I'll look up the schedules at the back and see where it's come from. 7 times out of 10, it's come from the EU. And you might think that, well, when we leave the EU, we can just abolish all European law as it affects our country. But no, you can't. I'm a libertarian, but I'm not an anarchist. And that is the sort of situation that we would face if we were to get rid of it as a stroke. So the reason that I say you cannot rest after we've left the European Union is because we have to get members in the Westminster Parliament. We have to disentangle all of this. Now, all the old parties, Nigel and Ray in particular, have said they're all alike. You can't put a cigarette paper between them. And I am actually going to stop using that cliche of Nigel's. It's his, it's not mine to use. But there is no difference between them. And if we leave it to them to sort out, you're just going to see more of the same. They won't repeal all these disgraceful interferences in the way that businesses work. Janice has just talked about how we're going to have quotas. Well, it extends further. Harriet Harman, the dirty bomb that she left when the Labour Party left office was the Equality Act 2010. Have you heard of that?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Now, I can understand if you're an employer, you have to treat everybody fairly. There is no question but that women should be paid the same as men, people shouldn't be discriminated on the against on the basis of their sex, etc. But it has got to absurd levels. It even affects those people who are self-employed. It affects us at the bar. We're all in chambers, as you may understand, but the Bar Council, following the orders which were set out by Harriet Harman in her Equalities Act, we have to have a maternity policy for self-employed people. This is absurd. The consequence of this is that members of chambers pay rent to chambers to cover the clerks' salaries and the cost of accommodation, etc. But women barristers can now go off and not have to pay any of that for a period while still getting work in chambers. This is absurd, and it's things like that that have to be addressed, and that is why we cannot leave it to the old parties. And this is actually going to be a very hard task. Any of you who are interested in history can see the problems that the Labour Party had way back in the day, way back in the 1890s, with actually getting MPs. It took a long time. I don't think it's going to take that long for us to start getting MPs. But we shouldn't just be looking at the European elections next year. There are local elections next year as well. Now, I'm not quite sure, forgive my ignorance, did you have local elections in Eastbourne this year?
Yeah, we county council elections this year, and we've got borough council election 2015 in Eastbourne.
Thank you, Alan. Well, the point is, we got 147 councillors across the country. Now, in the overall scheme of things, this isn't a huge amount, but it's a start. And we have to start from the ground up. We have to be working at the grassroots level. We have to get councillors. We have to push aside the old parties in our councils, because if people get used to voting for UKIP at a local level, then they're going to get used to voting for UKIP at a national level as well. Did anybody here stand as a councillor this year? Well, apart from you, Brett, you stand for every election. 1, 2, 3, 4. Not good enough, ladies and gentlemen. Every single person in this room ought to be considering standing as a UKIP candidate. You might think that you don't have the time to do it, or you're not good enough, or what have you. But look at the people who are your councillors already. Look at the people from the old parties. Do you admire them? Do you even know who they are? Again, they'll come round knocking on your door at election time, but they won't do anything else in the interim. So I'm sorry, but it is down to everybody in this room. If you're not going to stand yourself, get a family member to stand. We have to work from the ground up. The ultimate thing is this. We're hoping to get elected as MEPs next year, all of us. But the MEPs stand on the shoulders of the members and the activists. It's down to you that we are going to get there in the first place. You have to work hard, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
Thank you much indeed, Paul. On every chair this evening there should be a question form for you to complete to hand in. Now I don't know whether stewards are available or picked any up at all. These are the forms. Do people have everyone got these forms? Have you filled them up?
Yes,
okay.
some in the basket.
Okay, right. Oh, good. We're going to have a short break for 20 minutes where you can use the bar and just generally relax, and then we'll reassemble in 20 minutes' time, and with a whole bunch of questions from you all, from the speakers who answer. Okay, thank you much indeed. Just a short break. Thank you much, ladies and gentlemen. We've got plenty of questions now for you all. We propose to read a question out and ask the 4 speakers to make their response. Thank you. The first question we have is, how are the MEPs going to help the branches who have done so well to put them into office? Would you like to start?
Start again? Yeah, well, this touches on what I said before. It's why is UKIP, who, as Paul said, want the speediest possible abolition of the European Parliament, why are we going to get into the European Parliament? I see, and this is just my personal view, I see the European Parliament as a platform to demonstrate not only to the people of Britain, but also to the people of Europe, the hollowness of the EU, and particularly its pretense to be democratic. My big bugbear, and forget about the economic arguments and all that and the restrictions on trade, there are a lot of those. We are the country that developed freedom in Europe. We were the first to develop parliamentary democracy in Europe. We gave parliamentary democracy to the world. And now the European Union has taken that away. It's a shocking fact that of the 27 countries in the European Union, only 3, Britain, Ireland and Sweden, have not, within living memory, been a communist dictatorship, a fascist or Nazi dictatorship, or a military dictatorship occupied by the forces of one of those other dictatorships. In other words, democracy is a very new and fragile plant in Europe. And yet we have surrendered, and are in the process of surrendering, our democracy to this. I see the European Parliament as a platform to campaign against the destruction of democracy by the monstrous EU. That's my personal view.
Right, what would we do for you? Send you postcards? I'm sure you don't. No. Frankly, the job of an MEP, of a UKIP MEP, is utterly different from that of any of the others. What would be, you would have our phone numbers, you'd have my phone number if you haven't already got it, most people seem to have it, and you'd phone up and you'd say, look, we're running a campaign here on street lamps or dog fouling or whatever, and I would come round, knock on the door of the local newspaper, because I've got those 3 letters after my name, they'd open the door, and then I could bring forward what your problem is. I would also hold open meetings, you know, until you're frankly sick of it. My wife's been sick of me speaking for a long time, so I'm sure you would be. Hold open meetings to build the membership, support whoever your local MP candidate is. You know, you can hold meetings, I'd turn up, you know, nicely washed and dressed and stuff, and introduce your local candidates and get them publicity. Frankly, that's the biggest thing that we can do. I mean, there are things behind the scenes that we can do with organisation that are frankly tedious but need doing. And we would have staff who you could talk to. But what we would do really is bring you publicity, give you the opportunity to make your case in public. You know, you could attract people to meetings, you can get in the local newspapers, you can have me wittering on Radio Sussex or whatever as you've had before. Local TV. For instance, actually, I'm on Sunday Politics this week talking about the conference. But it's all those things. Once you've got those 3 letters, that's the important thing for us. It opens the door because they listen to that. You know, I'll still be the same person. You know, I might have a few more miles on the old jag outside, but I'll be the same person. But with those 3 letters, that makes a difference.
My pitch to the membership was that we don't want to be MEPs. I certainly don't want to be an MEP. I want to be an MP because that's where the power lies. So what I'll do, once our lists are announced, and contrary to what Ray said, I'll probably be only on 1 committee because I won't be spending my time over in Brussels. I'll be actually campaigning across the South East. Now, if it goes as we hope and I'm high up on the list, what I'll do is as soon as that list is announced, I'm having conversations with 3 Kent branch chairmen at the moment to stand as the MP. Now, I've got a public profile. I'm on Woman's Hour tomorrow morning, by the way, at 10 o'clock, championing our cause. I've been on Question Time. I know the media across the South East, they know me. I've done all the hard stuff, and as Ray says, rightly we can open the doors, but we as candidates are opening the doors now, and that will continue. So as soon as the list numbers are known, I'll talk to the Kent branch chairman, I will announce that seat, and I will create merry hell in that seat, and I'll do what we do best. Every by-election that we've taken a shop in the high street, and I've got 3 or 4 high streets in mind in Kent. We'll move in from day one. I'll have my office there, and that will continue. And every time there's a by-election, every time that you want some leaflets delivering or you've got a particular issue, then I'll be there with Ray. We'll be there together, banging on the doors with Nigel, and we'll bring the media with us because we have that presence. And once we have that presence in the town centres, we're not going to be hidden away like Labour or Conservatives sat up in the 2nd floor office. I'm going to have a big shop front, just along by Marks and Spencer's. We'll take over like a charity shop type thing, and I'll be running my ordinary business there, so I'll be able to afford to do that. And once actually I'm an MEP sitting over in Brussels, 1 day a week at the most, because I will be over here, then I'll use that platform and I will create merry hell, and I'll probably take on a token woman in Kent. And there's 3 of those. How did you guess it?
Blimey, they've said everything that I was going to say. Shame on you.
We're all singing from the same songbook.
We are indeed. Ladies and gentlemen, listen to this. The job of an MEP is not to impress Barroso and his crew. It is to impress the people here.
Yes.
Because ultimately they're the ones who are going to be deciding in the referendum, and after the referendum they're going to be voting for UKIP MPs, I beg your pardon. Yeah. As simple as that. So, yes, our focus has to be here. Every single person in this room knows the arguments against the European Union and can probably persuade their friends and neighbours about it, but the problem is, in our current celebrity-obsessed culture, the media aren't interested in what you have to say. We need figureheads. We have a stunning figurehead in the shape of Nigel Farage. We're going to have more in due course. I'm very much hoping to be a star myself. But here, Janice in particular, she is absolutely on the nail. We can't have offices. We have 3 offices at the moment. We have Gerard's working office. He's our current London MEP, and I'm going to join him. We're going to have 2 MEPs in London, Gerard and me. But he has his working office in Ilford. In London we have the office which is the European Commission, European Parliament office, which is now in the Conservative headquarters in Smith Square, which is actually very fitting because, don't forget this, which party took us into the European Union in the first place? The Conservative Party. Which party signed up to the Single European Act under Margaret Thatcher? The Conservative Party. Maastricht. Third one, Maastricht. Pushed through. That's when I was first involved. I worked for Bill Cash in the anti-Maastricht campaign in his little office in Great College Street when I was a Callow youth, not long out of university. Some of you may remember I gave a stunning speech to a young Conservative conference. And at the end of the speech I ripped up a copy of the Maastricht Treaty and was in the Guardian and on the telly, and it was wonderful. But this is it. We have to have shops. We have to have people can come in. Did anybody go to Eastleigh? Yes? Yes? In Eastleigh we have this wonderful shop right in the middle of the town centre.
I picked that.
Right. Here is another man who knows precisely where we need to be coming from. That shop was buzzing, people could see it. Locals could buy a pint of milk or whatever it was, and then if they were so inclined, they could think, well, I'm a bit ticked off with everything that's going on locally, I'm just going to pop into the UKIP shop and see what they can say. It would take me 2 minutes. That's what we need. We had a similar shop in the Croydon North by-election where Winston Mackenzie stood. This is my manor. It's South London. There was a shop in the High Street just 2 minutes walk from Norwood Junction, and it was buzzing, and that's what we need. And as an MEP, I live south of the river in London, but I will force myself to go north of the river into the wasteland and go around the branches and talk to people, not just UKIP members, but members of the public as well. We can't be scared of members of the public. Sometimes they're going to be a bit rude and shout at us and have demonstrations against us, but that doesn't frighten me. We have to get the message across, and that's the way to do it.
There's a bunch of questions but very similar to each other. Where does UKIP stand on fracking? Would UKIP stop wind farms? And what is UKIP's energy policy?
Right, yeah, I'll go first then.
Yeah, of course.
Okay. Right, energy policy. Whatever works. Frankly, we have a forthcoming disaster. The lights will be going out soon enough unless we fix it. Fracking, you know, the shale gas and oil, if it can be done safely, and it has to be proven to be done safely, with real penalties for anyone who doesn't behave according to the standards that we need, then we should do it. It's made a hell of a difference to the American economy. And what we need as well is security. We need energy security. At the moment, we're relying on foreign countries. They own most of our power supplies and infrastructure. We're getting most of our gas from Russia, which is why Putin's very much against it. Because at the moment, he can switch it off like that to us. And we'd be in real trouble if we upset him. If we have energy security, if we have the security of being able to look after ourselves to a greater or lesser extent, then that makes us a freer country, more able to pursue our own policies. Wind turbines, you know, we might rent them out so people can hang their washing on them. They're no good for anything else. They've been proven to be a waste of time. You know, it helps the Deputy Prime Minister's wife, who's got a cushy little number working for one of these companies in Spain, I believe. And obviously we know about David Cameron's father-in-law, who gets an obscene amount of money for having some of these back-chopping monstrosities on his land. It only helps the rich. Our present energy policy is one of the biggest transfers of wealth from poor people to rich people that this country's ever seen. And it's a sign of how derelict in their duties and remote from their responsibilities our political class are.
The lights are going to go out in 2015. For my sins, I did some work for a Conservative MP on a Friday, and we used to speak to energy consultants, and I've seen the papers on it. The lights are going to go out because no government has taken the hard decisions about nuclear power stations. They're all starting to close down, and they're all arguing who should be funding this, who shouldn't be funding this. So in the meantime, we do have a crisis on our hands. Now, say to the Greens, how are we going to fire up our houses? If you just by wind farms alone and the renewable energy mixes that they talk about. So I would say to the Greens when we have this argument, if you've got a washing machine on, you've got a family of four, you've got a washing machine, you've got the dishwasher on, you've got the electric cooker on, you've got all the computers going on, you've got your other mobile devices plugged in, you live in a 3-storey house because they're all tall and narrow now, you can't do that on wind turbines. It's not going to happen. And absolutely we should look at fracking. And I'll tell you one reason why, is because 1/3 of the pensioners' incomes in this country go straight out the door on high fuel bills and green taxes, and for that reason alone we should be looking at it.
The one thing I didn't mention was, for high energy bills, British industry is uncompetitive, and that is affecting jobs as well.
We have to look at nuclear. We can possibly look at fracking. I haven't done the research yet. I understand that people are concerned. I understand that others say, largely big businesses, say that their concerns are unjustified. But I'll make up my own mind in due course. What is absolutely certain is that windmills do not work when it is not windy, and they need coal-fired or possibly nuclear-fired power stations to back them up when they aren't working. Solar panels, give me strength. I put a little solar light up on my shed, and it works wonderfully in the summer. But 4 o'clock on a grim December afternoon, if I want a light to work in my shed, I have to take a torch, and that really sums it up. They will not work when you need it most. The only other thing that I would say, I'm possibly moving into the realms of being a conspiracy theorist here, but the Greens are also keen on these new forms of energy which don't work. They're more than happy for people's electricity bills to go through the roof. One of the other things that the Greens don't tell you about, this is their policy, it's hidden away, they're in favour of managed population decline. Have you heard of that?
No.
Right, they think there are too many people on this planet, and useless mouths and unproductive people ought to be got rid of. And if one was a conspiracy theorist, and I'm not, what better way to do it than to make sure that old people can't afford to pay their fuel bills and will freeze to death in their own homes. The Greens are not cuddly, they are nana killers, quite frankly.
Okay, the next question. Sorry.
I've actually put my mouth, or my money where my mouth is, and I've actually, at the time the Balkan demonstrations were going on, and this is, I suppose, a sort of brave thing for a person from Sussex to say, do come from Sussex, is that I'm in favour of fracking unashamedly, for several reasons. Mainly because I believe that we should, as far as it's possible, generate our own energy. According to surveys, we have enormous amounts of both gas and other forms of energy under our soil which can be released from the rocks by fracking. The people who demonstrated against this in Balkan were not only the villagers in Balkan, but the glitterati like Bianca Jagger, Polly Toynbee, etc., for whom renewables is a religion. But renewables can never, even in the best case scenario, provide more than a fraction of our ever-increasing energy needs.
Absolutely.
Shale gas is a gift from the gods. It will not only supply much of our own energy needs for the next century, but it will also free us from dependence on such foreign imports as oil from the Middle East that has got us into such serious trouble, involving wars and interventions in the Middle East that has brought us nothing. And who wants to be dependent on gas supplies coming in from Mr. Putin's Russia? Well, I don't. It can also bring jobs to areas, and I would be in favour of imposing on companies like Quadrilla and like iGas, which are doing the fracking, the insistence not only that they, as far as is possible, conceal their fracking mines, if you like. I know in Dorset, for example, which I know very well, oil drilling has been going on in the Isle of Purbeck and Poole Harbour for decades, and no one notices. It's very well concealed. But they should also provide jobs as far as possible for the local communities. In other words, they should make it worthwhile for the local communities to allow fracking in their neck of the woods. It's NIMBYism and it's greenism from planet Brighton. And we all know the sort of people, the Caroline Lucases of the world, who go and get arrested in front of the TV cameras in Balkan. They're not really interested in bringing down fuel bills for our poor people, not remotely. For them, renewables, so-called, are a religion. And as Paul said, it's a very, very sinister agenda they have of bringing down the population by possibly evil means. And I am in favour of fracking, and I've said so publicly on the UKIP website.
Right, the next question is, it's two questions at the same time. Would a Scottish vote for independence offer UKIP good prospects or bad prospects? And are you in favour of Scottish independence? If so, what are the repercussions for UKIP? Two speakers. Who's going to say first?
Yeah, I'm happy to. I don't know what's going to pan out for UKIP up in Scotland. We've got some great candidates up there. We've got our London chairman, David Coburn, standing. And he will certainly run a good campaign, and he will give Alistair Darling and Alex Salmond a run for his money, their money. It's good for UKIP. We'll have a platform up there. As we know, when we went up there, Nigel and David had eggs thrown at them, had Coca-Cola thrown at them. We're a threat. We actually are a threat to the status quo up there. Forget the Tories are nowhere, although they do have some representation in the Scottish Parliament because of proportional representation. Now, there is PR. There will be PR, I think it's AV, the alternative vote system, that will be used. So I think we'll get some traction up there. I think the breakup of the union is the worst thing that could possibly happen. I think we are stronger together, and I will certainly be campaigning to stay stronger together. But I will say something contentious here, and it was being brought up at the conference, at a Fringe event over the weekend, is that I think we should have an English Parliament. Now, this is important because the English MPs don't have a say of what's happening in Scotland, but you should know vice versa. We have the Barnett formula, where Scotland is supposed to be one of the most prosperous areas of the country, yet millions and millions of pounds from South East and London go up north because of something that was cobbled together over 30, 40 years ago. So that needs to be addressed. And you can only do that by having an English Parliament. Now, I don't want a nice shiny new building like the other assemblies have had. We've got our Parliament building, we've got Parliament, we've got the Houses of Parliament. We've actually got the infrastructure to run this as well. We've got the existing civil servants, and quite frankly, they're not exactly overworked at the moment. So if they have if we don't go down the independence route, then we should at least have an English Parliament.
Well, of course, we are the UK Independence Party. And it might sound trite, but if Scotland were to leave, we'd need to change our name to the Northern Ireland, England and Wales Party, or NewWIP. Which doesn't really have the same ring to it. I have, for many years, been a unionist. I have a confession to make. Even though I sound English, I am actually a Scotchman. Oh, yes. We come from the west coast of Scotland, Ayrshire. My mum's just gone back up there to live. My sister works for Smooth Radio in Glasgow. So I know a lot about Scotland. One of the saddest things is there has been a change of attitude. You've seen it in the way that Nigel was treated in Edinburgh. There is, I'm very sorry to say, a lot of anti-English hatred up there. It's on the fringes, it's not mainstream, but nonetheless it is very disturbing. Now, I am very pleased indeed that number one on the Scotland list is my chairman in London, David Coburn. You may have seen Question Time the other week, which was up in Edinburgh. Nigel was on it, George Galloway was on it. It was an audience of kids. Yes, did everybody see that? Yeah, a few people saw that. Nigel was brilliant as ever, but he just wasn't going down perfectly up there. And David Coburn is somebody who's going to make the argument for the union, who has a Scottish accent, who is a proud Scot and a proud unionist. And once he's in, and I very much hope that he is in, things will change. But what I cannot understand, and this is part of the anti-English hatred, the Scots Nats, they say, we want to govern ourselves. We want to be free of the English Parliament, but as a country within the European Union. The Scottish nationalists are mad.
Yeah, I don't understand the SNP attitude either. It reminds me of the attitude of the Irish, who spent 600 years fighting and rebelling against English control. Only within a few years of getting rid of us, they surrendered their national independence to the European Union with disastrous economic consequences for them. But that's another matter. One of the most satisfying things for me has been seeing that rather self-satisfied slug-like Alex Salmond coming completely unstuck in his economic forecast of what the wonderful things that will follow Scottish independence, and being told, well, no, actually, you won't even be allowed to join the EU automatically. You'll have to apply like anyone. And so they've been backpedalling, and this morning I heard his deputy, Nicola Sturgeon, saying, the Deputy Prime Minister, being presented with this quote from Alex Salmond in 1999 saying, Scotland will apply to join the euro, and we want to be in the euro, and say, actually we've had a fiscal commission examining this and we don't really want to be in the euro anymore, unsurprisingly, considering the disaster that the euro has been for Europe. So the Scots, Nats, the SNP are all over the place on this one. I think they're probably going to lose the referendum. It goes against the grain in a way, because if Scotland did become independent, there would never be another Labour government. But that doesn't really matter, because we've lost control of our country and lost control of our government anyway. So it doesn't really matter if there's another Labour government or another Tory government, because essentially the bottom line is we have to get out of the EU. And Scottish independence is just a plaything. It won't be a genuine independence at all, because Scotland, if it gets into the EU, will be under the rule of the masters from Brussels, just like Dublin was. And so what was the IRA all about, in fact? Why were they fighting all those years to get rid of the English, only to subsume the Irish independence in and rule from an even more distant ruler? That's my view.
Right, it's not going to happen. The Scots aren't stupid. They understand that their only real future can be as part of the Union. The Scots actually built the Union. If you go back, a lot of the major developments in this country was due to Scots influence. And I'm sure that the overwhelming majority of Scots who aren't blinded by bigotry against the English, because that's all it is. That's all Scots nationalism is, really. It's bigotry against the English. But the overwhelming majority of them are the same as the overwhelming majority of people everywhere. The sensible people who want the best for themselves, they want the best for their nation, they want the best for their children. They know that the United Kingdom is the best way forward, the best future for them. You know, what would happen if the rest of the United Kingdom left the EU and Scotland was stuck there? Would we have armed guards on the borders? Could Scots not come in? Would there be smuggling because their prices would be an awful lot higher than ours? You know, all the Scots businesses would be going straight out, and we'd have even more Scots flooding down here to work, which would make Scotland even poorer. The Scottish people are intelligent people. They will never allow the idiocy to happen.
A lot of voters are sympathetic to UKIP policies, but believe by voting UKIP it will split the vote, it will be a wasted vote, and allow the Labour Party in, or whatever party. How would you go about convincing the British electorate that is not the case?
I'll answer that first. This is very simple indeed, and we've seen that in the local elections last May or whenever it was. The Tories believe that UKIP votes somehow belong to them. This is insane. This is insane. We are not splitting the vote. Let me tell you this. In Eastleigh, for example, if the Tories hadn't stood, UKIP would have won.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that. Here is the point. If you want UKIP, you vote UKIP. Do not be frightened by the Tories who assume, almost like middle-aged lords, that their people belong to them. It is nothing of the sort. You vote UKIP, you get UKIP. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree with what Paul has just said. And the interesting thing for me in UKIP's rise is that we're now no longer just taking votes from disillusioned, disgusted Tories. We're taking votes from the Labour Party too, which has been left behind and left in the lurch, left high and dry by Labour. UKIP is a national movement. It's on its way. It's increasing exponentially all the time. As Paul said, if you want UKIP, vote UKIP, and more people are doing so. So go out, convince people that their vote for UKIP is not a wasted vote, and we will win. Mahatma Gandhi said, first they laugh at you, then they fight you, then they insult you, and then you win. And we're on the point of winning.
Those of you who know me would know the chances of me voting Tory aren't great anyway. And we're getting more and more people like that. When we started, it was right to say we were an offshoot of the Conservative Party mostly. But now, we're the only radical party in this country. We're different from the others.
Yeah.
They're all, you know, they're all varying shades of social democracy. They're all part of a single ruling class. There is no difference between them. There is a difference with us. Most of us, virtually everyone in this party, has worked for a living, has had to make sure that people were paid who they employed. We're the real People's Party. When they talk about a one nation party, and they're fighting over that at the moment, we're the one nation party, because we're the people of this country. That's it.
It's interesting the question is being asked in the first place, isn't it? Look at the by-elections. Eastleigh, we came second. And the media, my mates in the media tell me, you had another couple of weeks and you would have taken it. And that's true. It's only because the Liberal Democrats were so well organised and entrenched where they are. Rotherham, Barnsley, Corby, South Shields, we came second. Up in the north, the Tories don't have a vote. They're absolutely wiped out. So we're the real opposition in the north of England, and it's Labour that are very frightened. We're the only party that's representing the working classes. I come from the working classes. My mother was a cleaner, my father was a coal worker. I grew up in a sort of Tory very socialist household. But I passed the 11 plus and went to grammar school. We're the only people that are saying bring back grammar schools, or extending grammar schools, because my kids go to grammar schools. If you're stuck on a council estate, and you don't have the income to move yourself to a leafy suburb where the decent schools are, then your kids are consigned back to where they come from. There's no social mobility. And that's the message that we're taking out there, and that's what they're all really frightened of. Yes, we are, 60% of our vote still comes from the Tories. And great, I want more people like me to come over from the Tory party. But in Eastleigh, 20% of the people that voted for us hadn't voted for a party for 20 years, or had never voted before. So there was no political allegiance. So in the north, we're the official opposition. In the south, we're the official opposition. So vote UKIP, get UKIP. Sorry. Was it me saying I was a former Tory?
Well, while they're discussing, would you like me to sing for you?
I'm just going to ask Alan Thornton, when the meeting finishes? 9:30. 9:30, okay.
It's my query, because unfortunately I have to get back to London and away from civilization by British Rail. So I've got to catch a train presently.
Okay, well, I'd just like to thank Paul before he disappears. Thank you for coming this evening, and I very much enjoyed what you contributed.
I do, however, have raffle tickets. If I win, in my absence, I demand alcohol. Thank you. Good night.
The next question is, what is UKIP's policy on the National Health Service?
We're all aware that the National Health Service is supposed to be the jewel in the crown of the British state, because that was what it was formed for. You know, it was formed so that people could live, frankly. After the war, you know, it was really needed. But at the moment, all it is a vehicle for more and more bureaucrats to make more and more decisions on your life. It's not about doctors and nurses. Labour spent an absolute fortune bringing in more and more management. They've done all these PFI things where we're going to be paying for 50 years for hotels. They might as well be hospitals that will never really belong to us. We're being taken for a ride by the big state over the NHS. What we need is a return to the first principles, you know, where care is for British people who've paid into it all their lives. It's not an international or a World Health Service. We deserve it. You know, as people, I'm fighting in Hampshire at the moment over the Tories are closing some care homes purely, I can't say anything, but I don't think it's for the right reasons. But we have to fight so that we have an NHS that we can be proud of again. At the moment, there's very little to be proud of. Even though the doctors and nurses and the cleaners, they all work very hard, they're hamstrung by a huge bureaucracy that's in the pay of big state. We need to clear that out and make it what it once was. Something for the British people, so that we can live and live healthily.
The policy as it stands at the moment is that we have regional health boards, and those people are elected onto those health boards. So it's actually the people that decide the priorities. So I had a run-in with one of the health trust people down in Kent about a year ago, because there was a big argument about health rationing. So the MEP, there was an MP that I was quite friendly with, and his wife had IVF treatment, and they wouldn't have had children if they didn't. Now you could argue the rights and wrongs of having IVF on the health system, but I use it just as an example. That the woman that was running the health trust there was absolutely opposed to it. But what she did agree with was transgender, I'm looking for the right word about being derogatory, about sex change. Basically, the priority was given to sex change people. Now, to me, that was fundamentally wrong. She wasn't accountable to anybody. Nobody told her that she couldn't do this. Nobody was saying this is wrong or right or we agree with this. If we have county-elected health boards, then that will help. And also, I think one of the policies we're announcing tomorrow, because again, I have to gen up on all this, because I'm the only woman's out tomorrow to be given a grilling by Jenny Murray, is that we'll introduce contributions for, so migrants, they will not be able to claim on the health service unless they have some form of insurance policy in place, and they have to pay in for 5 years before they're actually eligible for that. It's wrong that there's more people running around with clipboards than there are with stethoscopes, and you know the appointment system. I was boring Alan to death. I had a small operation on my leg a few weeks ago, and the NHS told me you've got to have it dug out, and that was the downtime to me. Was just weeks and weeks and weeks. I wouldn't have been able to come here today. I wouldn't have been able to do other things that I've been doing. I've had to set my leg up, we had to get a cleaner in, the husband was going off to do the Waitrose shop after coming out of Canary Wharf for the night time, no problem, I have no problem with him doing that. And then I spoke to a private friend who's a dermatologist, and I said, well, look, I don't want to cut this piece out. He said, oh, ridiculous, we'll just freeze this off. And you know what, that's what he did. But isn't it appalling that the NHS kept me waiting for a couple of hours anyway, then they wanted to do this really debilitating operation, and that would have cost so much to them, to us as a taxpayer, so much of a cost to me, and the cost of infection because they couldn't actually stitch it where it was, and it was only a centimetre wide. And then the private service just comes at me with a gun, a gas gun, and freezes it off for no cost, hardly any cost. And that's wrong. That's totally wrong.
I know about the National Health Service because my partner Lally works in it, here in Eastbourne and in Hailsham and various other places, helping troubled children. I also know about it because my 13-year-old daughter came very close to dying earlier this year with peritonitis and a burst appendix, and was treated, fortunately, successfully in the Royal County Hospital in Brighton. There are a lot of good people, most good people, in the National Health Service doing very, very poorly paid jobs. There are far too many, and I get this from my partner, I get this from what I read in the newspapers, what I see on TV. There are far too many bureaucrats who are far removed from the system and who allow scandals like the Staffordshire scandal, where hundreds, literally hundreds of people died unnecessarily because of pen pushing, because of inappropriate treatments and sheer neglect. We need, as Ray said, to return to the National Health Service to its first principles, to basics, to what Nye Bevan in his generous mood founded it as, a health service to serve the people for their genuine health needs, not for sheikhs to come in from Saudi Arabia to have operations on the wives in their harems or whatever, or cosmetic surgery. Basic health care to keep people alive and to keep people healthy, and return it to what it is, that is the love of humanity demonstrated by so many nurses and doctors at the shop front, and remove the dead weight of bureaucracy from it. And then we can have a decent health service that the world will genuinely admire. At the moment, we're always told the world looks up to the National Health Service. I don't think that's true. I really don't think that's true. It is typical of so many of our bureaucracies, of the police service, which has been removed from the streets, hides behind clipboards and panda cars, of the BBC, which again no longer serves the people but serves a metropolitan left liberal elite. All these quangos have become taken over, bureaucratised. They need to be returned to serve the people.
There's another couple of questions similar to each other. A bit controversial probably. We're interested to know what UKIP's policies are on pro-life issues, and what are your views on the aborting babies simply because they're the sex? Apparently it's been on the news recently.
Oh, yes.
Do you want me to take it
Okay,
first?
say that?
Mr. Controversy. Pro-life. You know what? We believe that moral issues shouldn't be really dealt with too much in Parliament. It should be for the people. I would say, you know, obviously the aborting babies because of the sex is just wrong. There's no argument. It's wrong. It's just wrong. You're killing healthy children for no other reason than you don't like the sex of them. That's disgusting. That's despicable. But, you know, we're talking about pro-life issues. We're talking about the age at which abortion should be undertaken, or indeed whether they should be. I really feel that, you know, MPs in Parliament, they don't really know enough, and they might be unrepresentative, as in many moral issues, of the people as a whole. I would suggest probably the fairest way to do it would be to have some form of referendum. It's a really difficult question, but I think that would be not the easiest way, but the most fair way to decide something that really does trouble a lot of people, whether because of their religious faith or their morality. I can see no other fair way really of deciding these things.
As Ray said, that is UKIP's policy, that we can't actually decide on moral issues, and that we do actually believe in referenda on this, and I think that's the fairest way to do it, so the pros and the antis can have their say. I do believe a woman has to have control over her body. I had an abortion, and I'll tell you why. Because I was pregnant with my first child, and got to 20 weeks, and I went to the scan at Tunbridge Wells, and it was severely deformed. We'd never have survived outside the womb. So, and I knew my friend's parents went through that, and she had twins, and they died within a few hours. So actually, I took the painful decision to abort rather than carrying on with the child, that the nuchal area wasn't formed, there was no top past the brain. Sorry, I'm being graphic because I'm telling you why I'm pro-life. Also, pro-choice. But also, if you're raped, I really don't see why you should be able to carry that child, or you should have to carry that child. So what we would do is put it in a referenda, and I will fight for the woman's choice to choose, providing it is the right choice. It's not a lifestyle choice. It's not a choice because you couldn't be bothered to use a condom, or you slipped up because you were drunk, as many of our young people are doing. I'm totally against that. Those are my views. As for gender selection, it just smacks of something really nasty and horrid. It's not part of our culture, shouldn't be included in our life, and it should not happen.
The Abortion Act was first introduced as a private member's bill in 1967 by a young MP, Liberal MP, as it then was, called David Steele. Medical technology has moved on hugely since the 1960s, and there certainly is a case for looking at the Abortion Act again and possibly restricting the weeks in which it can be done, because fetuses can be kept alive much longer than they could be in the 1960s. Having said that, I am against, as Ray is too, and as the party is too, the state taking a too prescriptive role in people's moral judgment. I think, by and large, these things should be left to the individuals in consultation with their doctors and their medical practitioners. I think it was very, very brave of Janice to tell her story, and I'm absolutely against an absolute ban on abortion. It's never going to happen anyway. It's totally unrealistic, and the extreme anti-abortion stance of the more extreme elements of the Catholic Church is against that. On the other hand, I'm against absolute abortion on demand as well. So I think a middle course is the best course to adopt. I'm not sure that Parliament or a referendum is the right place to debate these, and I think the law should take a sensible, common sense view, as UKIP usually does, on these matters. And I think, by and large, it's down to the individual to decide what is best for them in their situations. And I don't want the state to be too prescriptive laying down the law.
Moving to the end now, could the panel say a few words about UKIP's education policy?
Education policy. Right. Those of you who know me might know I went to a grammar school. I was very lucky to have done so, even though it didn't really end in the way I first thought of it. But I learned so much, and I was very lucky. I come from a very, very poor area of Liverpool. All of the chaps on my street who didn't get the chance I got, most of them have been on the dole ever since, and it's over 30 years now. We don't have any social mobility in this country anymore. If you're born poor, you'll live poor, you'll die poor. Stuff like grammar schools, we're a way for talented kids from poor backgrounds to make something of themselves in life. You don't necessarily need it. I know many people who just went to an ordinary school who did well, but it was an option. It was a chance. UKIP's policy in itself says, you know, it's not prescriptive 11 plus, you pass, you fail, and you're thrown away. You know, it's more of a curve, where if you're good at something, then we'll give you the support to do that. You know, plumbers are much more valuable in everybody's life than a politician. You know, I'm sure if your boiler blew up at 3 in the morning, you wouldn't be phoning me. And if you did, you'd probably not get much help. But every child needs a chance to develop. We think if we have schools that specialise in things that will help those children develop, and not necessarily just give them the usual tosh. You know, everyone has to go along with the lowest common denominator in everything. That's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. It holds back people who are good at it. You know, if in my school, you know, everyone had gone along at my pace at woodwork, you know, it wouldn't have ended well, frankly. So there needs to be choice. And, you know, I'm particularly in favour of, for children anyway, the voucher system. I think it's great, because what it means is good schools will survive and bad schools will go to the wall. Also, personally, I would get rid of local education authorities, because they try and tell you what to do. The people who know best are the parents and the children and the teachers. You know, that's what counts. It's not someone sitting in the town hall who tells you that because you live in a poor area, your kid's got to go to a rubbish school, no matter whether they're a budding, I don't know, Stravinsky, shall we say. I don't know where that name came from. But you deserve a chance, your children deserve a chance, and UKIP are the only party, really, who believe that everybody should have a choice and should have the ability and should have the chance to make the best of their lives. And education is the first place to start. Thank you.
my views on grammar schools. I was given that leg up because I was a working class girl that went to a grammar school. But my education was stopped because of Labour. They decided that my school would become a bog standard comprehensive. I know if only that school now would be a bog standard comprehensive. It's gone into special measures and they're actually going to close it, which is dire. I tried keeping it open, it was in South East London, and I had the backing of the headmaster as well, and I suggested that it turn back into a grammar school, because 80% of the kids that go there now are poor black boys that recently come from Africa. They're not even Afro-Caribbean. And what you saw in that South London borough, £3 million houses where they used to bust their kids out, and the poor kids from Lewisham and Deptford used to come in. That's what we've got to stop, and that gives those children no choice. UKIP policy, and we'll be announcing some of this over the weekend as well, but what is in the public domain is that we believe that children should, and again this comes down to the governing school bodies, is that the schools can be open from 8 to 6. So they're in a caring environment. If those parents are working, not everybody chooses to work, they actually have to work, so they're actually in a caring environment. And childcare is so expensive, I think that's really good. It's actually cost neutral as well. And there's an important reason why those kids should stay in school a bit longer, because not every child has the resources that the middle class kids have got. I mean, mine have got an iPad in one hand, they've got a BlackBerry in another hand, they've got the telly on, they've got the computers, they've got the whole array of media to actually do their homework. Not that they do, but that's a side issue. But if they're in school, at least there's a level playing field then for homework and support. And also, they got a chance to do sport, which an awful lot of kids don't go to because the parents are just not interested, but it's important that we have sport as well. So that's the UKIP policy, and I think we're the only ones to actually offer that choice and try and ring fence our children's education so everybody does not only have choice, but there's an equal playing field too. Thank you.
Well, my two colleagues have said really what needs to be saying. UKIP education policies are sensible. One of the worst things that David Cameron did was to set his face against any reintroduction of the grammar schools at all, which Janice is lucky enough to live in Kent, which is one of the very few areas where there are still decent grammar schools. And I think it caused the resignation from the Tory front bench of Graham Brady, who got his own back when he became chairman of the 1922 committee, although he hasn't yet carried out his right function in life, which is to dethrone David Cameron. But that's another issue. But essentially, I believe in that the parents and teachers know best about their children's education, that decisions on education should be taken locally, that grammar schools should be introduced as the leg up for the working class without money, for the bright working class kids, that technical schools should be reintroduced for kids whose skills are practical and technical, but who don't have any opportunity to develop those skills. And lastly, that education should be a lifelong opportunity to be dipped into at any age. There's the University of Third Age, of which I'm sure that some of you have possibly benefited for people later in life. There's nothing that keeps a mind young as education and learning. Life is a constant, lifelong learning process, and the state needs to facilitate this, but at a local level, with parents and teachers locally deciding what's best for their children in their schools. My children, I went to a minor public school, but my children went to a state school, a comprehensive school. My 13-year-old daughter is still at it. My second son, who went to an ordinary bog standard comprehensive school, is now studying history at Cambridge University. My other son is studying horticulture. They're different boys. One is very academic, one is not. But they've been enabled to follow their own routes in life. And this is what education should do. We're not all equal, but we all need equality of opportunity. That's the crucial thing.
Paul on his amazing camera, and anybody else who I've missed out. From all of the candidates, thank you very, very much indeed.